Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today we'll be tackling incident management. You hear incident management and maybe think, okay, that's for like huge disasters, right? Well, get ready for a surprise. Turns out it's way more relevant to your everyday life as an EMT than you might think.
That's right. Incident management isn't just about handling massive earthquakes or hurricanes.
Mm.
It's about having a system for managing any situation that could overwhelm your resources.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So it's not just about the scale of the event, it's about how effectively you manage it. But let's be honest, sometimes even a small kitchen fire feels totally chaotic. How does incident management bring order to that kind of chaos?
Think of it like this. Imagine you're building with Legos. If you just randomly stick bricks together, you just end up with a jumbled mess. But if you have a blueprint and you follow the instructions, you can build something amazing. That's what the National Incident Management System, or NIMS, does for emergency response.
So NIMS is like the instruction manual for handling emergencies. I get it. But emergencies involve so many different people. Firefighters, police, EMTs, even folks from different towns. How do you make sure everyone's on the same page?
NIMS emphasizes something called interoperability. It sounds technical, but it's actually really cool. It means that everyone involved can communicate seamlessly and work together, even if they're from different agencies or jurisdictions. Imagine everyone speaking the same language, using compatible equipment, and following a shared set of procedures. That's interoperability in action.
So it's like a universal translator for emergency response. I love it. Now, within this NIMS framework, there's something called the Incident Command System, or ICS. What's that all about?
ICS is like the organizational chart for an incident. It defines roles and responsibilities so everyone knows who's in charge and what they need to do. And the best part is it's modular. So you can scale it up for a huge disaster, or you can scale it down for something smaller, like that kitchen fire we were talking about.
Wait, so you're telling me that the same system used to manage a massive wildfire is also used for like a multi-car pileup on the highway?
Exactly. Because at its core, ICS is about having clear leadership, effective communication, and a coordinated approach. It's about preventing those small incidents from escalating into big problems because of confusion or a lack of direction.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's be real, those organizational charts can get pretty complex. As an EMT, do I really need to know the ins and outs of every role in ICS?
You don't need to memorize the whole chart, but having a general understanding is super helpful. Think of it like knowing the key players on a sports team. You don't need to be the coach to appreciate a good play, but it helps to know who's the quarterback, who's the receiver, and so on.
Okay, I'm with you. So who are the star players in the ICS world?
Well, at the top, you've got the incident commander. They're the one calling the shots. Think of them as the conductor of an orchestra, making sure everyone's playing in sync.
I love that analogy. Okay, so we've got our conductor. Who else is in this emergency response orchestra?
Right alongside the incident commander, there's the command staff. You've got the safety officer, who has the power to halt everything if it gets too risky, like if a building's about to collapse. Talk about a responsibility. Then there's the public information officer, who keeps the media and the public informed, and the liaison officer, who coordinates with other agencies that might be involved.
So it's all about checks and balances, making sure things are running smoothly and safely. Now, within this whole structure, where does EMS fit in?
EMS is a crucial branch of ICS, focusing on three main tasks: triage, treatment, and transport. And you, as an EMT, are right in the thick of it.
Let's talk about triage. We've all seen it on TV, but what's it really like in the field?
Triage is about making tough decisions under pressure. You're faced with multiple patients, limited resources, and you have to quickly assess who needs immediate attention and who can wait. It's about doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people, even if it means making heartbreaking choices.
Okay, that's heavy stuff. I can see why they call it organized chaos. How do you even begin to prioritize patients in that kind of situation?
That's where the triage categories come in. They help us quickly sort patients based on the severity of their injuries. We use a system of color-coded tags: red for immediate, yellow for delayed, green for minor, and black. Well, black is for those who are unlikely to survive even with treatment.
Wow, that black tag category, I can't imagine how difficult that must be for an EMT to assign. It must take a huge emotional toll.
It does. But remember, triage is about maximizing the chances of survival for as many people as possible. Sometimes that means accepting that we can't save everyone.
Okay, so we've got these color-coded tags, but how do you actually decide which tag a patient gets? It seems like there's so much to consider in such a short amount of time.
You're right. That's where the START method comes in. It stands for simple triage and rapid treatment. It guides us through a quick assessment of a patient's breathing, circulation, and mental status. Based on these factors, we can quickly assign them to the appropriate category.
So START is like a cheat sheet for making those rapid triage decisions. I'm guessing there's a similar system for kids too, right?
Absolutely. For pediatric patients, we use something called Jumpstart, which is specifically designed to assess and prioritize children in a mass casualty incident. Because even in chaos, we have to make sure our youngest victims get the right level of care.
That's reassuring to know. Now, once a patient is triaged, it's all about getting them the treatment they need and transporting them to the right facility. But I imagine that's not always straightforward, especially in a large-scale incident where resources might be stretched thin.
You're right. Making those destination decisions is a crucial part of EMS within ICS. It's not just about getting patients to any hospital, it's about matching their needs to the capabilities of the receiving facility. A burn victim needs to go to a burn center, a child with a head injury needs a pediatric trauma center, and so on.
So it's like a giant logistical puzzle, making sure patients get to the right place at the right time. Talk about pressure.
It is. And it all has to happen while maintaining clear communication with the hospitals, coordinating ambulance availability, and adapting to the ever-changing dynamics of the incident.
Okay, I'm starting to see why incident management is so much more than just showing up and treating patients. It's a whole system designed to bring order to chaos.
Exactly. And it's not just about responding to what's happening right now. It's also about being prepared for the unexpected. That's why we have disaster plans in place to help us anticipate potential threats and develop strategies for mitigating their impact.
That brings up a good point. I'm starting to see how even seemingly minor incidents can escalate quickly if they aren't managed properly. It's like that butterfly effect thing, right? One small change can have huge consequences down the line.
Exactly. And that's where the concept of span of control comes in. It's a key principle in incident management that ensures no single person is responsible for too many people or tasks. Think of it like a pyramid. The incident commander is at the top, with a limited number of people reporting directly to them. Each of those people then has a manageable number of people reporting to them, and so on.
So it's about delegation and creating a clear hierarchy of responsibility. I'm guessing this is especially important in large-scale incidents where things can easily get out of control.
Absolutely. Imagine a single person trying to manage hundreds of responders and countless tasks. It would be impossible.
Yeah.
Span of control helps prevent that by breaking down the overall operation into manageable chunks.
Okay, I'm starting to get a sense of how this whole system works, but I have to admit, my mind keeps going back to those really big dramatic incidents. The ones you see on the news with hazmat suits and evacuation zones. Are those really as intense as they seem?
Hazmat incidents are definitely a whole other level of complexity and danger. But you know what? You might be surprised to learn just how common they actually are. We're not just talking about major chemical spills or nuclear meltdowns. It could be something as simple as a truck carrying cleaning supplies, getting into an accident and leaking its contents. Suddenly you've got a hazmat situation on your hands.
Okay, that's a little scary, but also kind of fascinating. So how do you even know if you're dealing with a hazmat situation? What are the red flags?
Well, some are pretty obvious. Visible clouds, strong odors, people collapsing without an apparent reason. But other times, it's more subtle. You might see containers with unusual markings or notice a pattern of symptoms among multiple people. It's about being observant and putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
So it's like being a detective, but instead of looking for clues to a crime, you're looking for clues to a potential hazard. And I'm guessing this is where those emergency response guidebooks and material safety data sheets come in handy, right?
Exactly. The ERG is like the hazmat Bible. It provides information on thousands of chemicals, their properties, and the recommended safety procedures. And the MSDS is like a product manual for a specific substance, telling you everything you need to know about its hazards and how to handle it safely.
Okay, so you've got your resources, but what about actually approaching a hazmat scene? That seems like a whole different ballgame than responding to a typical medical emergency.
You're right. Hazmat incidents require a whole different level of caution and specialized equipment. The first priority is to establish control zones, to limit the spread of contamination and protect responders and the public. You've got the hot zone, where only specially trained and equipped hazmat technicians are allowed, the warm zone for decontamination, and the cold zone, which is considered safe.
So it's like a series of protective layers, each with its own specific purpose. Now let's talk about those hazmat suits. I always wonder what it's like to wear one of those things.
The level of protection you need depends on the substance involved and the level of risk. Level A protection is the most comprehensive. It's like wearing a spacesuit. You've got a fully encapsulated chemical-resistant suit with a self-contained breathing apparatus, or a CBA.
Wow, a spacesuit for hazmat response, that's intense. But I'm guessing you don't always need that level of protection, right?
Right. There are different levels of PPE from level A down to level D, which is basically your standard work uniform. The key is to match the level of protection to the specific hazard. You don't want to be underprotected, but you also don't want to be so bulky that you can't do your job effectively.
It's all about finding the right balance. Now, I have to ask, what's it like treating patients in a hazmat situation? I imagine that adds a whole other layer of complexity.
It definitely does. The first priority is to ensure the safety of the responders and prevent further contamination. Then we focus on decontaminating the patients and providing medical care.
Decontamination, that sounds pretty intense. What does that actually involve?
It can be as simple as removing contaminated clothing and rinsing with water, or as complex as using specialized chemical solutions.
Mm.
The specific method depends on the substance involved.
I bet. And what happens if a patient is critically injured and can't wait for full decontamination?
That's a tough call. We might have to make the difficult decision to transport them to the hospital before they're fully decontaminated. But in those cases, we take extra precautions to protect ourselves and the ambulance crew.
So you're balancing the risk of contamination with the need to provide immediate life-saving care. Talk about pressure. I'm guessing the receiving hospital needs to be prepared for that kind of situation too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to communicate clearly with the hospital and let them know what they're dealing with so they can take the necessary precautions. And our ambulance will need to be thoroughly decontaminated after transport as well.
It's amazing how much goes into managing a hazmat incident. It's like a carefully choreographed dance between responders, medical personnel, and the receiving hospital. And to think, it all starts with something as seemingly simple as a spilled container of chemicals. Okay, I need a moment to process all of this. What has stood out to you so far?
It really does highlight how crucial incident management is, doesn't it? It's not just about reacting to the immediate danger, but also about thinking ahead and preventing things from spiraling out of control.
That's what I'm realizing. It's like, yeah, hazmat situations are scary, but even seemingly small incidents can become major problems without the right approach. You mentioned disaster plans earlier. Are those part of this thinking ahead strategy?
Absolutely. Disaster preparedness is a huge part of incident management. It's about identifying potential risks, developing plans to address them, and having the resources and training in place before an incident occurs. Think of it like having a fire extinguisher in your kitchen. You hope you never have to use it, but if you do, you're glad it's there, right?
Yeah. Right. It's like having that safety net, that peace of mind knowing you're not starting from scratch when something happens. But honestly, disaster planning sounds pretty overwhelming, especially for larger organizations. Where do you even begin?
It can be a big undertaking, but the payoff is huge. A well-prepared community is a resilient community. It's a community that can bounce back from disasters and emergencies with minimal disruption. And that's what incident management is all about, minimizing the impact of these events on our lives.
So it's not just about saving lives in the moment, it's also about ensuring the long-term well-being of the community. Now, you keep mentioning the Incident Command System, or ICS. What are some of the key principles that make it so effective?
One of the most important aspects of ICS is its emphasis on clear communication and a unified chain of command. Imagine a football team without a quarterback. Everyone's running around, but there's no direction, no coordination. ICS provides that structure, that sense of purpose, so everyone knows their role and who to report to.
So it's like a well-oiled machine, everyone working in sync toward a common goal. But how do you maintain that level of organization in the midst of chaos? It seems like it would be easy for things to get lost in the shuffle, especially in a large-scale incident.
You're right. That's where accountability comes in. It's about keeping track of everyone and everything involved in the response effort. Who's on scene? Where are they located? What tasks have they been assigned? What resources have been deployed? It's all about maintaining situational awareness and ensuring that everyone is working safely and effectively.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you actually keep track of all that information in real time? Is it like a giant spreadsheet or something?
Well, technology has definitely made things easier. We have sophisticated communication systems, mapping software, and data management tools that help us maintain a clearer picture of the situation. But even with all the tech, it still comes down to good old-fashioned communication and a well-organized system.
So it's about combining the human element with the power of technology. Now, I'm curious about what happens when the immediate crisis is over. How do things transition back to normal?
That's where demobilization comes in. It's the process of releasing resources and personnel as they are no longer needed. But it's not just about everyone packing up and going home. It's a carefully planned process to ensure that the transition back to normal operations is smooth and efficient. We have procedures for debriefing personnel, restocking supplies, documenting the incident, and most importantly, learning from the experience so we're even better prepared for the next one.
So it's a continuous cycle of planning, responding, recovering, and improving. It's like a living, breathing system that's constantly adapting and evolving. I'm really starting to appreciate the complexity of it all.
It is complex,
Yeah.
and we've only scratched the surface. But I think it's important to zoom back in now and focus specifically on the EMS branch of incident management. We've talked about triage, treatment, and transport, but there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear more about the broader role of EMS in this whole system. What are some of the things we haven't touched on yet?
Well, for one, EMS is responsible for coordinating medical resources across the entire incident. That means making sure there are enough ambulances, medical supplies, and personnel available to meet the needs of the situation. It also means working closely with hospitals to ensure that they can handle the influx of patients.
That sounds like a huge logistical challenge. I'm starting to realize that EMS isn't just about treating individual patients, it's about managing the overall healthcare response to the incident.
You got it. And another crucial aspect of EMS within ICS is providing psychological support to first responders. Think about it. We're exposed to a lot of trauma, both physical and emotional, and those experiences can have a lasting impact.
That's a side of emergency response that I think a lot of people don't really consider. It's not just about bandaging wounds, it's also about addressing the invisible wounds that can linger long after the incident is over.
Exactly. And that's where concepts like critical incident stress management, or CSMM, come in. CSM is a structured approach to helping first responders process traumatic events and prevent long-term psychological harm.
So it's like a debriefing session, but specifically designed to address the unique stressors that first responders face.
Right. It's about creating a safe space for us to talk about our experiences, express our emotions, and receive support from our peers and mental health professionals. An incredibly valuable resource for anyone in this field.
I can see why that would be so important. It's like you can't pour from an empty cup, right? You have to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. Now, I'm remembering something we talked about earlier, the potential for seemingly minor incidents to escalate into major problems. Can you give me an example of how that might play out in the real world?
Sure. Imagine a call comes in for a residential building fire. It starts in just one apartment. Seems contained, right?
Yeah.
But what if the fire spreads quickly? Or residents become trapped? Suddenly you've got a mass casualty incident on your hands.
Okay, I see your point. It's like you never know when a routine call might turn into something much bigger. So it's about being prepared for the unexpected, being able to adapt to changing circumstances, and having the skills and training to handle whatever comes your way.
Exactly. And that's why incident management is such a critical part of emergency response. It provides the framework, the tools, and the training we need to effectively manage any situation, big or small.
It's really amazing when you think about it, this whole system designed to bring order to chaos, to save lives, and to protect communities. It's like a hidden world that most people never even know exists. But it's a world that's absolutely essential to our safety and well-being.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Now, before we move on, I want to touch on one more important role in the EMS branch, the medical director.
Oh, right. The medical director is the physician who oversees the entire EMS system, right?
Yeah.
What's their role in incident management?
The medical director plays a vital role in providing medical oversight and guidance to the EMS branch, especially during large-scale incidents or disasters. They might be involved in making triage decisions, developing treatment protocols, or even providing direct patient care in the field. Think of them as the ultimate medical authority on scene, helping us make the best possible decisions for our patients.
So it's like having a doctor on call, but for the entire incident. That's reassuring to know.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here in the EMS branch. What stands out to you most from everything we've discussed so far?
I think for me, it's the fact that we often focus on the physical aspects of these incidents. You know, the injuries, the damage, the immediate danger. But we sometimes overlook the psychological impact on both the victims and the responders.
Yeah, it's like we've talked about all these systems and protocols, but at the end of the day, it's people who are making those decisions, taking the risks and saving lives. And those people are dealing with incredible pressure and emotional stress. Absolutely. And the source material really highlighted that emotional toll, that triage can take on first responders, having to make those split-second decisions about who gets treated first, knowing that some people might not make it. That's a heavy burden to carry.
Yeah, and it's not just the triage decisions, it's the exposure to trauma, The long hours, the physical and emotional exhaustion of it all, it takes a toll.
It does. And that's why it's so important to have support systems in place for first responders.
Yeah.
We talked about CSMMs, but there are also peer support groups, mental health professionals, and employee assistance programs. We need to make sure that those who run towards danger have the resources they need to take care of themselves.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself in order to be there for others. And I think that's a message that extends beyond emergency response. We all need to prioritize our own well-being so we can be there for our families, our communities, and ourselves.
Absolutely. Taking care of ourselves is not selfish, it's essential.
So we've talked about incident management at the organizational level, but what about personal preparedness? What can we as individuals do to be better prepared for emergencies? I mean, I know I should have a go bag and an emergency plan, but honestly, I haven't gotten around to it.
You know, you're not alone. A lot of people put off personal preparedness because it feels overwhelming or they think it'll never happen to me. But the truth is, emergencies can happen anytime, anywhere. And having even a basic plan in place can make a huge difference.
Okay, so what are some simple things we can do to get started, like besides the go bag, which I promise I'll put together this weekend?
Start by thinking about the potential hazards in your area. Are you in an earthquake zone,
Hmm.
a hurricane zone? What about wildfires or floods? Once you know what you're facing, you can start to develop a plan.
Okay, that makes sense. Know your enemy, right? So let's say I've identified the potential hazards. What next?
Think about your evacuation routes.
Yeah.
If you had to leave your home quickly, do you know where you would go? Do you have a meeting place for your family? These are all things you want to figure out beforehand, not in the heat of the moment.
Right, because panicking and trying to figure out your escape route while smoke is filling your house is not exactly a recipe for success. So evacuation routes, check. What else?
Communication is key. Do you have a family communication plan?
Yeah.
How would you get in touch with loved ones if phone lines were down or cell towers were overloaded?
Okay, good point. I guess those disaster movies where everyone's frantically trying to reach each other on their cell phones aren't too far off from reality.
Exactly. So having a backup communication plan is essential. It could be as simple as designating an out-of-town contact that everyone can check in with, or having a set meeting place if you get separated.
I'm realizing that personal preparedness is a lot like incident management on a smaller scale. It's about planning communication and having the resources you need to handle whatever comes your way.
You got it. And just like with incident management, personal preparedness is an ongoing process. It's about staying informed, updating your plans as needed, and practicing those plans with your family.
Well, I have to say this deep dive has been eye-opening. I'm definitely feeling more motivated to get my own preparedness plan in order. But I think the biggest takeaway for me has been the realization that incident management is so much more than just responding to emergencies. It's about building resilience both individually and as a community.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's about being prepared not just for the worst-case scenario, but for any situation that disrupts our normal routines. And it's about knowing that we have the systems, the skills, and the support to handle whatever comes our way.
And that's a really empowering message. It's not about living in fear. It's about taking control and feeling confident in our ability to face challenges. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a challenge. Take some time this week to think about your own personal preparedness. What steps can you take to be better prepared for an emergency? Talk to your family, do some research, and start building your own resilience. You might be surprised at how empowering it feels. Thanks for listening.